Hello everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're well wherever you are in the world. And if you're not, maybe we can provide a little bit of light entertainment for you. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old children's books such as one we're going to be reading, but a physical example would be this one. This is over 125 years old and it's been in the family for all of that time. Anyway, I grew up reading old books and they're a great way to expand your mind, to view the world as others see it. When you read a book, you are being shown the world through the mind of the author. And it's one of the advantages of reading, especially old books, is that when you do so, when you read books that are written in a different time, written by authors from a different place, written by people who are set within a different cultural period or way of being, it helps you to actually understand more about the life that they were living, the world that they lived in. Not completely, obviously, but the pictures that they draw in your head become part of you. They actually colour the way you view the world, whether you intend them to or not. It's one of the reasons why in the past people have been a little bit thingamy about what their children were allowed to read, because they were worried that their children were going to take up some habits that the parents may not like. Now, as a parent, you have a responsibility towards your children, yes, but it's a good idea to help them to learn to think for themselves, to make their own choices, and actually see for themselves how people really are, not just how you as a parent want them to see the world. You are equipping them for life. And yes, there are such things as what is age appropriate, what isn't age appropriate, but don't wrap your kids in cotton wool. It doesn't do them any favours, and when they eventually leave home, if you have been cutting them off completely from the rest of the world, then they will probably rebel against that. Whereas if you are open to how other people are, you don't have to necessarily engage in the same behaviours as other people, but where you're not negative about other people just because they're different to you, then your children will not have something that they want to push against. They will actually be much more likely to maintain a positive attitude towards you and value the things that you've taught them. Just aspects of being a parent that I've learned along the way. So what else do I need to tell you if you're new here? I usually read 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, starting at 3 p.m. New Zealand time. Last week, unfortunately, I missed 2 days. I missed Wednesday and Friday because I had to take an older family member down to hospital for a surgical procedure and then bring them home again. They're doing well, no problems there, but it's just one of those things that happen. And so yes, I tried to apologise in advance for the fact that I wasn't going to be here. Hopefully this week I will be here, although I will have to finish early today because I have a committee meeting to do with the donkeys that live on the reserve next door that I am required to be attending. So I will be finishing and being over at the meeting at about 4 o'clock. Yeah, so it's been a busy day for me already. I've taken product photos, I've done some troubleshooting to do with our system of what goes where in our production system because it's all just homemade, handmade stuff, but beautifully done. What part of the process I'm meant to step in and do my thing, and did we miss something or whatever, and all this sort of stuff going on, and it's just been kind of overwhelming. But I did manage to get dinner underway in the slow cooker, so that will be ready for me when I get back from my meeting. I've got some tips if you're new here. So 3 tips: snacks, drinks, snacks, and somewhere comfortable. So what those 3 tips mean is make sure you always have water handy because it keeps your brain and your body working. This is my favourite water bottle, but it's not the one that I use while I'm streaming because, as you can see, it's tall and thin and it tips over very, very easily. You can imagine. Just putting that down out of the way. So what you'd see instead is me sipping on this instead. But also I have my favourite drink, which is coffee. And today's coffee is a stovetop brewed black coffee. We used up all the milk, so therefore if I'm going to make coffee, I'm going to make coffee that is pleasant when it doesn't have so much milk, when it doesn't have milk in it. Normally I make coffee with an espresso machine, but that's okay. So that's number one, drinks. And whatever your favourite drink is, if it's appropriate for where you are and the time of day it is for you. Like if you're driving, I would suggest if your favourite drink is whiskey, that you don't participate at this point. Save that for when you get somewhere where you're not going to be driving anymore. Use your brain, not mine. So one was drinks, we've covered that. Number two is snacks, and today's snack is, yes, those who've been here before can tell me what this is. That's the cracker packet. So today we have crackers and cheese. Hang on, I did kind of get prepared for this, as in I got the cheese cut. That is not a euphemism, don't be silly. I sliced the cheese off the cheese block, so we have cheese and crackers. I just forgot to get the crackers out of the packet, that's all. Snacks. Oh yeah, by the way, I have ADHD and I'm on the autism spectrum, so I get lost very easily. In the middle of whatever it is I'm telling you, my mind just will go off in a completely different direction. That includes when I'm reading the words off the page to you. It's not unusual for me to be halfway through a sentence, the words are coming out of my mouth, my eyes are on the words on the page, and suddenly I have no idea whereabouts on the page I am. And so we have to find it. It's lots of fun. It keeps it lots of fun. And so that's one of the positives of me being having ADHD. Of the positives of me having autism is that when we go off on a rabbit trail to find out about something, because we love finding out about things, sometimes it's quite an extensive rabbit trail. I'll try not to do too much of that today because I've only got until 4 o'clock and it's already nearly 3:10, which doesn't give us much reading time. So snacks, we've done drinks, we've done snacks. Comfort is, reading is a lot more fun if you can sit somewhere comfortable. So this is my reminder for me and for you. The visual reminder is get yourself somewhere comfortable to sit. Now, if you are working, if you are studying, if you are doing one of those sort of things where I am actually helping to keep your brain occupied while your body, your hands, your eyes are busy working, I'm sorry, you'll just have to give a pass on the being comfortable bit and also on the whiskey. But if you can be somewhere comfortable, that can be lying down, that can be hiding under your favourite blanket, tucked up in bed. I do know people who listen to me as part of their going to sleep routine at night. Not that my style of book reading is particularly given to putting people to sleep, because there's so many rabbit trails and chattering on about different things. I don't do the really bland, slow, quiet, atmospheric reading as my usual style. As you can tell, it's just the way it is. And for some reason, my system keeps telling me, welcome to the chat room, and I have no idea what's going on with that. But that's okay. We're just going to ignore that for the moment. That's just the way it is. Whatever. It doesn't matter. So that's drinks, snacks, and comfort. And like I say, if you need to be working while I'm reading, that's all good with me. We don't do tests on the work that we do here. It's just we learn about things for the sake of finding out about new stuff. We also have a few other features. Usually when I'm reading, I will have a jigsaw puzzle available and it will be over here. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry, you just get this video window here. So you miss out on the interaction with me when I'm reading live, answering questions, finding out things for me, and playing with our jigsaw puzzle. But you get to watch the videos whatever time of day suits you. So pluses and minuses, whatever system you're using. If you're watching on Twitch, then yes, you will be watching over there as I make the jigsaw puzzle available. If there is anybody here who wants to do a jigsaw puzzle, then what you do is you put in a command in the chat box. This is on Twitch, obviously. You put exclamation mark and then jigsaw, Jigsaw, or exclamation mark puzzle, and either of those will bring up the jigsaw, the link to participate in the jigsaw puzzle. But I will need to know if you want to do it beforehand, because then I'll actually turn on the jigsaw puzzle, which currently you can't see. It's not there until somebody really wants to do it, but I will put it on a bit later on. So that's one of the interactive things that happens. Another one is that I have a dictionary command now to look up a word. It is available for me and for moderators. Sorry about that, folks. Just because I'm test running it still, we've got it's another iteration of the one that we had last time. And it's one that somebody has actually built for me to be able to use while I'm here doing this. I'm just checking to see that we haven't got any dropped frames or anything happening, which might be why it keeps on welcoming me to the chat room, but I can't see anything going on there yet. So I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know if you're getting that prompt or not. Now, as you've seen, I do not have the chat on my video screen. I only have it available through Twitch if you're viewing this on Twitch. Just because when it's on the video screen, you can't interact with it. You can see it, but only just, and the words are so small, you can't really even read it. You can see that it's there, that's about it. So when I have a dictionary definition, it will be coming up over here, above my right shoulder, on the left-hand side of your video screen, and that will still be visible if you are on YouTube. I've made sure it's inside the video window so you get to see it. Sometimes when I bring up a dictionary definition, it may not be what we're expecting it to be, and the reason for that is because we haven't yet figured out a system for telling. If you look up a word in a dictionary, sometimes there'll be more than one definition for the word in terms of how it's used. And so if the meaning that we're expecting is not the first definition from the source site that this application is, the widget is actually using, then we're not going to get to see the definition we're thinking of. So I'm going to give it a wee test and see what we get. There you go. Tomboy, a girl who behaves in a typically boyish manner. And the reason why I put that one in is because the current book is A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, and I'm about to start reading. Now, I've got this picture behind me because it's a hung tile cottage in rural England around the time of when this book is set. Kind of the sort of thing that I imagine was common around the area where the family that this girl is from were living. Not specifically the one that the author would have had in mind, but that doesn't matter. This is her first book that became fairly widely published in the style of what she later became famous for. She wrote a few other books before that, but they were not so much for children's entertainment. She was a little bit radical because she decided to write books that girls would enjoy reading, not books that they would learn lots of important moral things from. Anyway, so she's the one who started off the whole schoolgirl stories type of thing. But we'll get on with reading. And I am assuming that you can actually see me, but that's okay. We'll see how we go. There was something. I've got social media, I've got a Discord server, I've got a YouTube channel, and I've got a Twitch channel. There's links for all of those things, and there are also commands that can pull them up in chat. I suppose I can give them to you. So there's my social one. I'm part of a group of readers called Codex, and I'll give you the link for that. The link that I've given you gives you the Discord server and also the Twitch team that I'm part of for Codex. Not all of our Codex readers are yet in the Twitch team because it takes some time for some people to enact the different systems that are involved with that. But if you join our Discord server, which is not just for the readers, it's actually also for anyone else who's interested in Codex and public domain books. We have a book club. There's the next discussion is coming up at the end of the month. For me, it will be the last Sunday of the month at 12 o'clock midday New Zealand time. I'm not sure what that is for the rest of you, but if you go over to Codex, the Discord server, you'll find out all about it. And we are reading in our own time so we can discuss it together on stream. We are reading Orson Scott Card's, I think that's what his name is, novel. It's a sci-fi. Speaker for the Dead. That's what it is. And it follows on from Ender's Game, and it's part of the same series. And it's really interesting. I'm listening to it as an audiobook because at the moment I'm finding it really, really hard to read books that are a little bit more emotionally intense, which this one can be from time to time. So I read children's books out loud. Otherwise, I listen to audiobooks. And the Codex readers are a really great bunch of people. We've got people who read audiobooks as a living. That's their job. But they also read in their spare time for the fun of it. But they will then get into discussions with people about what they're reading. We have people who are school teachers. We have people who are librarians. We have people who are actors. All sorts of things. People who are travellers. There's probably a lot of life is represented in the Codex readers. So yeah, if you want to find out more about it, go to the Discord server. Also go and check out the other streamers. And when you're checking them out, give them a follow. And if you've got it available, give them a subscribe. That's good too. Anyway, let's get on with reading. We are reading A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazil. Even though it looks like Brazil, apparently it was pronounced Brazil. I don't know. Chapter 6, Sunday. And I'm hoping it's not too long because I really do have to be at the meeting at 4 o'clock. So we'll see how we go. Anyway, and I'll try not to interrupt myself too much. Chapter 6, Sunday. And each of the chapters starts with a little bit of a poem, an extract from some bit of poetry, probably of the sort that kids used to learn at the time when this book was written. A poor man served by thee shall make thee rich. A sick man helped by thee shall make thee strong. Thou shalt be served thyself by every sense of service which thou renderest. That sounds a little bit more uplifting, moral, encouraging us to do the right thing. Anyway, that's okay. We can still learn from it. It was Sunday afternoon and the children sat in the rose parlour, with the windows wide open to let in all the sweet summer scents from the garden. Patient Lillian was struggling to teach Bobby a scripture lesson, for his form master, that's from school, had decreed that the names of the books of the Old Testament must be repeated without a slip immediately after prayers on the ensuing Monday morning. Now, it was quite common for a certain sector of society back at the time that this book was written. This one was published in 1904, okay? So at the time that this was published, it was quite common for children from a certain sector of society to go to what was called a church school. Or if you were living away from the main centres, like the cities, if you were living in a small town or a village, the only school that was available was the church-run school. And so, yes, they would have prayers at the beginning of their day. They would have hymn singing and things like this. It was a normal thing at the time. So just accept it and learn from it. Right, here we go. So after prayers on the ensuing Monday morning, poor Bobby had neither a retentive memory nor a great disposition to learn. He fidgeted and kicked the leg of the table and said it was a jolly shame of old Peter's to give a fellow Sunday prep. Prep means homework in this sense. He hopelessly confused Ezra and Esther, floundered at Ecclesiastes, and the minor prophets filled him with despair. So the first part of the Old Testament has some major events going on, and then you've got some poetry books, and then you've got the major prophets, and then you've got the minor prophets, and there's a whole string of them, and they've got some little short books and some slightly longer ones, and some of them are rather odd, and some of them are just sort of like, oh yeah, he's a little bit more of that. So the minor prophets is that section of the Old Testament before they get into the New Testament, which is the stuff from the time that Jesus was born and the people who are following him. Anyway, just in case you didn't know that, because a lot of people don't these days. Oh, Bobby, do try again, entreated Lillian. Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk. It's no use, Lil, said the despondent Bobby. I may as well make up my mind to take a caning and spare myself the trouble. Oh, yeah, that's right. Corporal punishment at school. You get the cane if you got something wrong. Not just doing something naughty. Not nice. Lillian, dear, are you busy? Said Aunt Helen, putting her head around the door. I thought you might have taken this jar of beef tea to old Ephraim. So Ephraim's an old chap in the area. Beef tea was considered to help with people's health, and people are rediscovering it because they talk now about bone broth. So beef tea is a variation on that sort of thing. And at this stage, it would have been homemade. It would not be using something like bovril, which is a meat extract type of supplement, but also a spread and also a basis for a savoury type of hot drink kind of thing. It's very English. Trust me on that. Oh, Auntie, no, sorry. Taken this jar of beef tea to old Ephraim. I hear he is not so well again, and he was not in church this morning. Oh, Auntie, let me take it, cried Peggy, glad of any excuse to interrupt the study of her collect and catechism. They are church terms for different parts of the church service back in the old days. Trust me on that one, I don't need to go into that detail. Be careful not to spill it then, and be sure to bring back the basket. And while you are there, I have no doubt he would be pleased if you read to him for a little. He is getting so blind now, poor old man, and it is dull for him living all alone, said Aunt Helen, who liked to teach the children to help their neighbours. Old Ephraim was a quaint and original character. I don't know about you, but I grew up in an era where people used to be referred to, someone who was a little bit unusual was referred to as a real character. And it was just a way of just sort of saying, well, they do their own thing, they do it their own way, they're not quite run of the mill. So even then they were using it. I'm not as old as the book, but the term was used that way. Old Ephraim was a quaint and original character. He had come to Gorswin from the North Country and had been a shepherd for 40 years at the Abbey. Now, the Abbey is meaning the farm that they live on. The land used to have an abbey on it, which at some stage has been pulled down and the materials have been used for other things, probably to do with the dissolution of the monasteries, Henry VIII, all that part of the history stream. And it's just remained the name of the farm and where they live, the house that they live in. He was past work now and lived in one of the village almshouses. That's a house where poor people live because people give alms, give financial gift to help. And so when you are giving alms, that sometimes is what it was going towards. It was the almshouses. Now, if things are run well, they were a good thing. Unlike the city poorhouses, which is where you were expected to slave your guts out to pay off your debts, but because you were a poor person and you lived in the poorhouse, you didn't really have a lot of opportunity for working, but you were basically slave labour. Not so good. Almshouses, because they were based in small places and they generally had a good attitude towards helping. And if somebody can't help themselves and needs help, it was often a good way to do it. Not such a bad thing. So he was past work now and lived in one of the village almshouses, subsisting partly on the parish dole and partly on private charity. For though Mr. Vaughan might practice rigid economy in his own private expenses, that's the children's dad, he had never a grudging hand towards the poor. The little, low, whitewashed cottage was a humble enough place, but it looked cheerful this Sunday afternoon, with the sunlight streaming in through the tiny window and a few early white roses shedding their sweet perfume in the small garden front. So often English houses would have a little garden out the front. Actually, I wonder, yes. See how there's a lane there and there's a bit of a path across here. There's a garden between the house and the front wall. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about here. So the garden front. Peggy found the old man seated in his elbow chair by the fireside. An elbow chair, I think, is a chair that has arms on it, so like armrests. I don't know why they called it that. Maybe we should see if the dictionary knows. Let's try out the thing. And if it doesn't know, nothing's going to show. It doesn't know. We'll have to find another dictionary to find that one. The source for this one is the Free Dictionary, and somewhere I think I can actually change it to something else, but I'm going to have to tinker in under the bonnet to do that. It's a little bit beyond me at the moment just because there's so much going on. Anyway, carrying on reading. So Peggy found the old man seated in his elbow chair by the fireside, his head enveloped in a huge flat oat cake, tied on with a red cotton pocket handkerchief so that he resembled some new species of mushroom. Now, I know what an oat cake is. Most people are used to oat cakes that are like biscuit size, cookie size. They're thinner than a normal cookie, but maybe not thinner than a biscuit. We have a family member who actually makes oat cakes as a snack, and what they do is they're using oatmeal, ground up oats, and you can do that if you can't get oatmeal these days, you can do it in the blender. And then you mix it all up with a little bit of salt and water until and you squish it all together until it forms basically like a form of pastry or dough, and then you roll it out and you put it on the bottom of a hot frying pan that has maybe a little bit of butter, maybe dry. And then when it's cooked long enough, you turn it over, and it's a little bit soft. It's not like, it doesn't go crispy like a biscuit and stay hard, so you can pick up one end and have it. If you picked up one end, it would be drooping down like this, and then it would break off because it doesn't have egg in it or anything, usually. So an oat cake around his head, that would imply that he put it on for some warmth. Maybe he's got bad teeth. We'll find out. I have not come across this as a cure for someone with their head enveloped in a huge flat oat cake. Seriously, that is just strange. Let's try that for a different definition. Nope, that's another one that's not there either. Ah, well. Why, Ephraim, she cried. This is Peggy, stopping short in amazement. Whatever is the matter, and what have you got on your head? Headache, Miss Peggy. Ah, replied Ephraim, shaking his grey locks solemnly. There ain't nothing like a hot oat cake for a bad head. It do cure it wonderful, to be sure. Well, it seems a queer thing to put on anyhow, remarked Peggy, wondering privately whether the old man would consume his remedy afterwards for tea. How's the rheumatism? Better, Miss Peggy, greatly better, since I've kept a potato in my pocket. Ah, it's a fine thing for the rheumatics, is a potato, but, with a sly wink, it must be stolen or it bean't no use at all. There you go. Did you steal it then, Ephraim? Cried Peggy with thrilling interest. That's as may be, replied the old man, willing to change the subject now it was growing personal. Is your pa keeping well these days? The catechism says it's wrong to steal, observed the righteous Peggy, keeping sternly to the point, and anxious to improve the occasion. Haven't you got a Bible, Ephraim? Aye, aye, returned the culprit evasively. There be one somewheres. Don't you know where it is? Said Peggy, severely. Oh, aye, Anna Jones was in a Saturday, siding the top of the cupboard, and I seed her with it in her hands. Oh, I reads the Bible, I does. It's all about wars, them Israelites, fighting with the other heathen. It's about something else too, said Peggy. Miracles and parables and epistles, that means letters, and oh, lots of things. Wouldn't you like me to read some to you? Because it is Sunday, and this is the sort of thing that you do on Sundays back then. And she's been told to do something improving to help. Nay, now, Miss Peggy, said Ephraim, much alarmed lest she should expect him to stir his rheumatic old bones in search on the cupboard top. I reckon sometimes 'tis better to think on things nor to read them. I've time to do a deal of thinking sitting here. Perhaps I might read you something else then, volunteered Peggy, determined to be a ministering angel, despite the evident unwillingness of her protégé. Yeah, said the old man, considerably relieved. There'll be a drawer full of books in the dresser. Take your choice, miss. Take your choice. Peggy turned out the drawer by the simple process of emptying it onto the table and disclosed a very miscellaneous collection of literature. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering what the odd noise is in the background, it's the wind in our chimney, which is in the side of my office space here. A very miscellaneous collection of literature, socialist pamphlets, agnostic newspapers, and radical tracts were mixed up with teetotal treatises, missionary leaflets, and the parish magazine. Now, back at this time, that would have been people used to write pamphlets to convince others of some good cause or some new way of thinking that needed to be acted on and things like that. And then they would hand them out, or they would sell them, or they would put them in people's letterboxes and all this sort of stuff. It was a way of sharing information. They didn't have TV. They didn't have radio. How else were they going to get this information? Not everyone's going to go to a meeting. And if you want them to come to a meeting to find out about something, you need to give them a little bit to go on to decide if they want to come. So that's why there was such a wide range of things available that he had been given at some stage. Interesting. Sheets of ballads, which are a type of song sheet, which Ephraim had bought as a boy, laid side by side with a tattered copy or two of Zadkiel's prophetic almanac. Some advertisements of patent medicines. So those are kind of like ones that people have invented, not made by a company. You know, in Macbeth, where it's like Eye of Newton, tongue of whatever else it is, that sort of thing kind of is like a patent medicine. It's where somebody puts together some remedy in a bottle and then sells it to you. It's not like going to a pharmacy or a chemist or anything like an apothecary or anything like that, or a doctor. It's actually just somebody goes around making them and selling them. Anyway, so patent medicines, a recipe, and they'd sell them in the back of magazines and newspapers, a recipe for sheep dip, and a Wesleyan hymn book. The Wesleyans are what in modern New Zealand are referred to as the Methodist denomination. They've been around for quite a long time, but it was a particular style of church. A Wesleyan hymn book. Peggy gazed eagerly at an ancient chap book, which is like a chapter book, but they're short chapters, and they're called a chap book, which set forth the stories of Dick Turpin and Jack Sheppard, interspersed with rude woodcuts of the gallows, rude being rough, poorly done, and whipping post, but she heroically put it aside as being unsuitable for the day. It is Sunday and we're meant to do improving things. Finally, she settled upon a little worn volume bound in calfskin, type of fine leather, with the title, A Sigh of Sorrow for the Sinners of Zion, breathed by an earthly vessel, known among men by the name of Samuel Fish. I'm sure Aunt Helen would think this is all right to read to him, she said to herself as she drew a chair to the other side of the fire. It was not very easy reading, for the print had faded till it was almost the colour of the yellow leaves, and the S's were all long, so that Peggy found herself continuously. Hi, how are you? Good to see you, Q. Great to have you here. I'm just going to turn on the jigsaw. And so if you want to do it, you're welcome to. The link is if you type that in the chat, that should work. Great to have you here. Now, it is a short read today. I have to be at a committee meeting for looking after the donkeys and the park next door in less than, just under half an hour. So only reading to then, trying not to do too much extra chatting. So my intro today was very, very short, relatively speaking. But carrying on anyway. Great to have you here. So, cool. And sorry about missing 2 sessions last week. It was like having to take a family member to hospital for a surgical procedure and then bringing them home again a couple of days later. And our hospital, with the way it is at the moment, if you want to get that surgery slot, you don't say no. You just go when they say, and you don't try and get it changed. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait months. So, yeah. Anyway, carrying on. Not very easy reading, for the print had faded till it was almost the colour of the yellow leaves, and the S's were all long, so that Peggy found herself continually reading fins instead of sins. Have you ever seen a book where it has the S's are written as really long letters, and they look like a cursive F, but they're not, they're an S. I don't know why, it was just a writing style, I suppose. But she did do her best, conscientiously, and the old man nodded in his chair, sitting up briskly, however, when he felt her reproachful eyes on him. Peggy stopped, quite hot and weary, at the end of the first chapter. Do you like it, Ephraim? She inquired, anxiously. Aye, Miss Peggy, it be fine, it be, surely, said the old man. What does it all mean? Said the child. It is so hard to read, I can scarcely understand it. Why, as to that, miss, answered Ephraim, it seems to me as long as it's pious words, there bain't no call to understand 'em, let alone I'm that deaf today, it seems naught but a buzzing like when you read. Peggy closed the book hurriedly. I think I'd better be going now, she announced. I hope your headache will be well soon. Can't I put the kettle on for you? I, miss, if you be so bountiful. My rheumatics be cruel bad when I stir me. Peggy filled the kettle from the pump in the back garden and hung it on its hook over the fire. She found the old man's cup and saucer and set out his tea on the little round table by his side, and finally took her departure, feeling she had at least attended to his temporal wants, and might leave the rest to older and wiser heads than hers. I'll call and see Mrs. Davis. There'll be plenty of time before tea, she said to herself, as she came back up the village street, swinging her empty basket. Mrs. Davis was a dear old Welsh woman. That's right, this where they live is on the Welsh border, I think. Or was that in a previous book? I think it's this book. Mrs. Davis was a dear old Welshwoman and a particular friend of Peggy's. She was one of nature's gentlewomen, for her kind heart prompted those little gracious, courteous acts which in a higher class we call good breeding. So there you go. She made quite a picture in her short linsey-woolsey petticoat. Now that is something which I don't think the dictionary is going to find, but if you want to write it down, I shall type it. Oh, I didn't put the oatcake one actually in. Oh, oatcake works. There you go. Any of many flat biscuits or cakes made from oatmeal. There you go. I just didn't hit the enter. I'll see if it's got see. We'll see. Yeah, it's just one of those things that takes time. And especially when you're looking after family members, it's not a lot you can do about it. You just go with what you can do. So sorry about that. I on the Wednesday, I tried to change it on my schedule on Twitch so that people could see it. And I was going to post an Instagram post, but I was driving the car at the time, so that didn't work, did it? I'll try this one with a hyphen in. Oh, linsey woolsey worked. A fabric made of both linen and wool. Linsey and woolsey. There you go. We learned something. Carrying on. So it was a not uncommon blend of fibres. Before the days of the common use of cotton and it being cheap, linen was something that was used for fabric, not uncommonly, because you could grow linseed. It's a plant, linen, which produces long fibres within the stems of the plants. They're quite twiggy looking things and they don't get very tall. They're about knee high or maybe hip high. And they have these sky blue flowers on them. They look gorgeous. But the seeds, hi Tina, great to have you here. The seeds are the ones that we know of as linseed, which is used for making linseed oil, but it's also the seeds that are used for making linseeds are often ground up and used as an ingredient with some things, but also as a mild laxative. And the seeds themselves work as a laxative because the coating on the seed is quite slippery. If you ever actually have a handful of seeds, you will find that they're quite. It's quite an interesting texture in your hand when you're holding onto a handful of the seeds, and they slide through your fingers very, very easily. It's just the way they are. So linseed was what you used to grow linen plants, and linen plants is where you got the fibre from to make linen, the fabric. It's a lot of hard work, which is probably why cotton became very popular, because you get a lot more fibre from it and it was easier to harvest. Anyway, we'll carry on. So nice to know that dictionary definition turned up in the dictionary after all. She made quite a picture in her short linsey-woolsey petticoat with the check apron, so it wouldn't have been as hot as a straight woolen one. Probably not quite as expensive either. With a check apron, her plaid shawl crossed over her cotton bodice, and the frilled white cap framing the kind old face with its apple cheeks and soft white hair. She was sitting among her bees this Sunday afternoon, beating with an iron spoon upon an old tin kettle. "They be swarming indeed, Miss Peggy," she said, "and here I've had to sit the whole of the day beating this old tin, this Sunday too. But we can't expect the poor creatures to understand that, can we?" And no, I'm not doing a Welsh accent. I cannot. I'm not going to try. Just letting you know beforehand. I'm just making it a little bit more working class than what Peggy seems to have. "I suppose not," said Peggy, settling herself on a low wooden seat at a safe distance from the agitated hives and letting her glance wander round the little garden where the tall yellow lilies reared their stately heads over a mass of sweet cottage flowers, pinks and forget-me-nots, poppies and double daisies, sweet williams, loved of the bees, pansies, lupins and snapdragons, over the cottage where the white roses climbed up the thatch of the very chimneys, and where through the open doorway could be seen the neat kitchen with its red brick floor, the settle placed by the fireside, the tall grandfather's clock ticking away in the corner, and the oak dresser with its rows of blue willow pattern plates, and back again at last to where Mrs. Davis sat with her grandchild by her knee, a small round-eyed boy whose thumb was stuck perpetually like a stopper in his mouth, and who stood watching the bees with stolid indifference. "Won't he get stung?" asked Peggy, who thought he looked far too near to the swarming hives for safety. "No, dearie. I think they know me and Willie now, though they'd attack a stranger as soon as not. I was dreadfully stung once," confided Peggy. "I lifted off the little box on the top of one of the rectory hives just to see how the bees were getting on, and they all came rushing out and settled on me. Mr. Howells seized me and put my head under the pump, and father was ever so cross, for he said I shouldn't have meddled with them." Sorry, trying to turn the page. "The bees don't like to be interfered with," said Mrs. Davis. "You should never touch them in the daytime. Always take the honey at night. Joe says you must tell them if there's a death in the house and tie a piece of crepe on the hive or they'll fly away." Crepe, spelled C-R-A-P-E in this context. Crepe is a type of fabric, and it was commonly used in the Victorian period for a sign of mourning. And therefore, in this context, it was black or dark grey, or maybe even a shade of dark purple. But when they talk about wearing crepe, that's usually what they mean. Not that all crepe was those colours, but that was its main time of use, was an indication of mourning. So it's talking about putting a piece of mourning indication, crepe fabric in a dark colour, on the hive so the bees know, as well as you having told them. They are showing that they are in mourning too. Otherwise, according to superstition, they'll leave. Well, I don't quite hold with all folks say about them, but they are strange creatures with queer ways of their own. They seem quiet just now, so I think I might leave them for a few minutes. I have a pot of honey I should like to send to your aunt, miss, if you would kindly take it to her. I'll go inside and fetch it. No, Willie, my pretty, you can't come. Granny's going up the ladder into the loft." "I'll take care of him. Come with me, Willie dear. Come and see the pretty flowers." And Peggy seized the stolid infant. There's that word again. What is it? Stolid, moving or revealing little emotion or sensibility, dully or heavily stupid. So in this case, I think it's just sort of like, not likely to move, not going to be swayed by your opinion, sort of thing. Not involved. And Peggy seized the stolid infant by his disengaged hand, not the one that with his thumb stuck in his mouth. Willie did not look enthusiastic about the attractions of the flowers. He lives with his grandmother. He sees them all the time. But he allowed himself to be led away, staring at his new guardian with round, solemn round eyes of solemn distrust, and solacing himself with his thumb. "We'll build a little house," said Peggy, anxious to prevent the suspicious twitching of her charge's mouth from developing into a roar, and taking up some bricks and loose stones which lay under the wall. "See, we'll make a kitchen and a parlour, and put down leaves for a carpet. Here's a little round stone for a table, and the pansy flowers will do for dollies. They've such funny little faces. We'll make them skirts out of laurel leaves and put them to bed in the corner." So she's using her imagination, that's good. Peggy's well-meant efforts at entertainment were suddenly interrupted by a loud sniff from the other side of the wall. And looking up, she saw the round, reproachful face of Polly Smith, a girl of about her own age, and who sometimes came up to the Abbey to help Nancy at busy times. "Why, it's you, miss, I do declare," exclaimed Polly, "and making playhouses in Mrs. Davis's garden on Sunday too. I am surprised. I've been to Sunday school." Peggy felt rather caught, but she carried it off as well as she could. "I was only amusing Willie," she said. "He was going to cry because Granny Davis went indoors and left him." "Aye, she's been sitting swarming her bees all day. I see her when I was going to chapel, and I see her again when I come back, and when I goes to Sunday school she was still there. My dada says he don't hold with folks as can't keep the Sabbath holy." Well, if you've got bees, you kind of need to do something about it. And Polly turned up her small nose in a distinctly aggravating manner. "How did you get on at Sunday school?" asked Peggy, who did not like insinuations against the moral worth of her dear Mrs. Davis. "Splendid, miss, I always does. Teacher gave me a prize for saying hymns. Such a nice book. Wouldn't you like to look at it?" "Are you sure it's a Sunday book?" inquired Peggy, who could not forbear her revenge. "Oh yes, for I looked at the end chapter, and she dies beautifully, and they plant snowdrops on her grave, and her big brother, what's so unkind to her, gets drowned through going boating on Sunday," replied Polly, regarding Peggy as if she thought her courses might lead her to a similar watery fate. "Here's Granny!" cried Willie, abandoning his thumb to seek the protection of the friendly linsey-woolsey petticoat. "Aye, so it be. My granny sits in the parlour on Sunday afternoons with her blinds drawn down and reads her Bible. She's a godly old woman, she is." And Polly took her departure with a conscious sniff, as if deploring the depravity of her neighbours. Peggy was very much upset. "Is it really wrong to look after the bees and amuse babies on Sunday?" she asked father afterwards. "No, dear, certainly not. The Pharisees came to our Lord with just such a question, and you know he answered them that it was right to do well on the Sabbath." Oh, by the way, the rest of the book is not going to be all Sunday stuff. It's just because it was very much part of people's lives at the time when this was written. It's also in the story. "God did not mean it to be a day of misery, but a specially joyful and happy day in which we were to think a good deal about him. Sometimes we can show our love for him quite as well by helping others as by reading our Bibles or going to church, though we should not neglect that either. As for shutting ourselves up on Sundays and thinking it is wrong to look at the beautiful things around us, this is mere ignorance, for nature is like a wonderful book, written by God's hand, and the birds and the bees and the flowers are all pages out of it for those who have eyes to read them rightly." And I would guess that that was a little bit. There was a bit of a change of attitude happening around the time that this was written, and this is kind of going along with that mood change, which is good. Peggy thought of this as she sat among the ruins, watching the sunset that night. The sky, flaming in bands of crimson, violet and orange, looked like the very gate of heaven, a golden city which you had only to cross the hills to reach. Surely another page in that book of which father had spoken. "It's like one of the pictures in the interpreter's house in the Pilgrim's Progress," she said to herself, or Christian and hopeful on the Delectable Mountains, when they looked through the glass and thought they saw something like the gate and also some of the glory of the place. So that's all quotes from the book, those different phrases. She stayed a long, long time among the crumbling old walls, watching the gold fade gradually out of the sky. It was very still and peaceful in there, and she liked to sit and think how the Abbey must have looked in those strange, bygone days when the little steps had led to a dormitory, and the broken pillars had held up the roof of a church, whose tinkling bell had rung out at sunset, calling to prayer those old monks who slept so quietly in their forgotten graves. An owl began to hoot in the woods beyond the river, a great stag beetle came droning by, and the bats flew over her head with their shrill little cry, flitting here and there like night swallows. Peggy got up and brushed the dew from her dress and walked slowly back to the house in the gathering twilight. In the rose parlour, Aunt Helen sat turning out her little writing desk and wiping suspicious drops from her eyes. "Don't keep old letters, child," she said, as Peggy crept up to her with silent sympathy. "It opens so many wounds to reread the tender words of those who are estranged or gone away from us, and all the hopes and expectations that have come to nothing." She's lost somebody. I don't know if the relationship was gone already or if they disappeared. We don't know. Maybe we're going to find out later in the story. I don't know. "Don't read them, Auntie. Let's tear them up and burn them if they make you cry." No, I can't bear to part with them. After all, we'll lock them up in the desk again. But Peggy, take my advice, and if you quarrel with anyone, go and fight it out at once and get it over, and don't let misunderstandings make the breach so wide that nothing can ever mend it again. There's a story behind that, then. Don't know if we're going to get it in this book, since it's a children's book. Anyway, right, that's it. That's the end of today's reading. I'm not going to start the next chapter because I don't have enough time, but we can have a quick chat. So, what else is going on? I told you last time, I think, that I've been accepted as part of the Throne gifting program, which means that if anyone wants to send me a gift, they can look at my wish list and pay for it for me, which is cool. And at the moment, I think I've got four things there, 3 lighting things, and the 4th one is a community goal, which is I'm hoping one day to eventually have enough funds to be able to get a post office box so people can send me books, because I do have people in New Zealand who want to send me books to share, to be able to give away to other people, and they don't want to send them to my home address, which is lovely. They want to be able to send them to a post office box, so I maintain my privacy and they do too. Anyway, that's just that. But if you're interested in the Throne gift program, then you're most welcome to have a look at it. I think if I go, sorry, no, that didn't work. I'm trying to get it so my links are working. Throne is just the name of the program. That's all. The Queen's death. Yeah, that was a bit of a shock. Kind of expected, but also a little bit of a shock. It's like, oh my goodness. Mainly because I've never known her not being Queen of the British Empire, sort of thing. The British Commonwealth, sorry, not the Empire. And I know there are a lot of people who are really anti anything to do with royalty. I can understand that. But when there are accusations about they did this and they did that, but this particular person, even though technically they represent something, by the time decisions were made, Britain was actually being run by a parliament, not by royalty, in a lot of ways. There were lords, and they also had ruling powers and made a lot of decisions. Not everything was decided by whoever the reigning monarch was at the time. So making accusations against the Queen for something that was loosely connected with some ancestor of hers several generations back is a little bit like accusing someone just down the road from you of the horrible things, of being responsible for the horrible things that their great something or other grandfather might have done in a time when that was considered a normal thing to do. It's really very short-sighted. So anyway, I do think she's done considerably well with transitioning the British monarchy from a very, very traditional style to something that's more in touch with the modern world. So that's just the way. Things are very different now. If it was a matter of setting up something new, I don't think it would happen. But because it's existing, and she does it, the British monarchy actually does have some quite useful roles in terms of, because they're not political, they're not elected to a position, so therefore they're not under political influence of other people. But they have an advisory role. Whoever is the reigning monarch actually has an advisory role with British Parliament. They don't make decisions, but they look broader than just a political situation for decisions that are being made. So whoever's in charge of the country politically wise, so the current Prime Minister in England, not New Zealand, but in England, then has a meeting with whoever the reigning monarch is on a regular basis, and they say, this is what's coming up, these are the things we're discussing. And because a lot of the time politicians, even when they have an authority position across a whole nation, not just being a politician as a job, they will still make decisions that are based on what works for the party that they represent, rather than for the good of the nation that they are governing. And so therefore part of the role, the advisory role that whoever the reigning monarch has, is to look at what the historic implications are of a decision that is coming up, what possible side effects there can be from that, things that are beyond just a political short-term, right in front of your face decision. And also having someone who is a considerable figurehead to be able to represent your country when you are greeting, meeting, representing other heads of state in other countries. So in the more Western countries, that may not be considered to be important, but a lot of other countries, if you have somebody who is just a political figurehead, there's not a lot of respect when you meet somebody who is representing your country. When you meet when the head of your country, if you're one of these other countries, meets the head of another country, they want to meet somebody who is representing well, strongly, really is that person, rather than just being a political figurehead sort of thing. And it can actually make quite a difference to international relations, with the trickle-down effect of how they felt, whether that person felt respected by, well, we just sent the Secretary of State, rather than actually, no, we sent the King or Queen or whatever to spend time with them. It's like, oh, they actually respected me. That means they are going to talk with me as an equal, rather than thinking I'm a lesser person because I'm not a Westerner. There's all those factors too. So anyway, yep, in 70 years' time you can read any books that she's written. The English copyright law is 70 years from the author's death. So that's how it works. In America, I think they've got a thing which is to do with the author's death, but also to do with the publication date. One of them is 100 years, and I'm not quite sure how it works with them, but basically if a book is on Project Gutenberg, then it's safe to be able to use in a public context because copyright has expired. So there you go. And I'm going to have to run along now because otherwise I'm going to be late for my meeting. I'm so glad I got my dinner on the way for the family. And it's tantalizing. I'm enjoying the smell of it while I've been reading to you and chatting. So I hope you have a great next few days until I see you again, and ongoing anyway. But great to have you here. Lovely to have you listening in. I'll save that jigsaw puzzle that we didn't do for the next time, since it didn't get done. Lovely having you here. Good seeing familiar faces too. And you stay safe as well. Be good to see you again. So in the meantime, happy reading.